Jordan, what's the difference between an incubator and an accelerator? I think a lot of people want to know.
Moving through the buzzwords, incubator and accelerator. Now, these both words get bandied around the whole time, right? Oh, I need an incubator, and I spend far too much of my life going, sorry, what do you mean by an incubator? What do you mean by an accelerator? Because they're not understood. So to answer the question, incubation, the etymology, the origination of incubation was driven by venture capital. So if you were a fund, there was a scenario here where I say, okay, I have my portfolio company. Is there any way I can create additional value add to my portfolio, potentially increasing the chance of success? And incubation was a light touch way, because you can't be hands-on, by the way, as an investor. If you have to make 10, 15 investments to sort of stand the statistical chance of getting a return on your fund, then you can't be hands-on, because if you're spending hands-on time with 10, 15 startups, you know, the cost of doing that, and you just don't have enough time to do that. So you can't be hands-on. So the scenario here is, how do we a bit more, you know, so you're a passive, you're sort of a pseudo-inactive investor. So how do we add a little bit more in a light touch way, which doesn't burden our fund and the few GPs that run it? And incubation was just a scenario there. It was like, well, we need an office to house ourselves. Can we find ourselves in a cheap part of startup land, an office which can house a few others, and maybe some of our portfolio companies can rent some desks off us and be incubated in the same space, and we can have very casual water cooler type conversations to be up to date, right? So an incubator is not a program. There's no structured engagement. The origination of incubation was simply saying, hey, like, let's hang out in the same space. And by hanging out in the same space, we can add a little bit more responsiveness and a little bit more sort of light touch value add than we would do by not being connected at all. So that's incubation. That's the origin of incubation. You know, the origin of accelerator programs was a growth hack on early stage deal flow. So again, the origination was as an investment model. So early stage venture capitalists were saying, okay, well, look, if I raise a fund, let's call it $10 million, it doesn't really matter the quantum, and I need to invest in 10 to 15 startups to deploy that money to stand a chance of getting an ROI, well, it's going to take me maybe a year, 2 years to find the startups, find that handful that I'm going to invest in each year, deploy the capital, and then I'm basically either going to wait, see it out, or start raising a new fund. Now, when you looked at what is the business model of venture capital, what's the key driver, and I've mentioned it already today, that drives the success of your fund? Deal flow. If you can get access to the best investment opportunities, the best startups, the best entrepreneurs, you get the best deal flow. Because the bizarre thing here is, as VCs, is the entrepreneurs need to knock on your door. Like, you can put yourself out there all you want, but ultimately they need to come to ask you for money. So how do you get them to knock on your door? And how do you create a sort of competitive advantage and effectively game the business model of venture capital? And that was the origination of the accelerator model. It was simply saying, hey, we're going to do this growth hack. We're going to create a carrot, some sort of program, and we're going to create an applications process, which now we get 400, 500, 700 startups apply for a start date, and now we can roughly hit a stick at the top 10, because what due diligence can we do at an early stage? Like, to be honest, there's bugger all. Like, you lift up the hood, it's like 3 people with a big dream and a shitty product, right? And you're like, okay. So there isn't really any due diligence. That isn't a competitive advantage. So you roughly hit a stick at the top 10, you give them a bit of pizza money, you take some equity, now you have your investment vehicle done. You have your portfolio. So that was the origination of the accelerator industry. We're simply running a 3-month structured program, which was the carrot, the value add, the value proposition, that allowed you to create the applications, that allow you to deploy capital and create an unfair advantage in early stage venture capital risk investment. Now, the interesting thing is the world has changed, and accelerators have changed from there. But that's where it was. So the commonalities of an accelerator program is it's still roughly 10 startups per batch. There is a structured program of engagement. You need to measure the distance traveled on both the individual founders, their team, and their business, and you have to grow them and deliver on the value proposition to them. Now, today's world, whether it's an investment vehicle or a corporate innovation engine thing, that's a debate. But an accelerator program is much more of a structured program.
You guys, please feel free to jump in with your own questions.
Actually, I want to open up questions to the floor. Anybody, just put your hand up because we do have some mics floating around. Leo over here. Please say which speaker you want to talk to, or do you want both the gentlemen to answer your question?
Hi, my name is Rafiza. I'm with Sime Darby. Sime Darby is a conglomerate based in Malaysia. We're a 105-year-old company in 5 sectors. I'm just making a comment about, Haresh, you mentioned about the lifespan of a company, right, becoming shorter and shorter. And I just want to comment about the title, because we've been in an innovation journey for about a year. Actually, it's not other companies is disrupting us, it's we ourselves are disrupting ourselves with our fixated with governance, compliance, risk management, etc., etc. And my question to Jordan, and maybe Haresh can also share, is at our corporation, the senior leadership are on it, board of directors, and in fact, that's why they've created this, my department called Innovation, Group Innovation. They're really into it, the senior management, board of directors. Our 50% of our staff, we have about 106,000 staff all over the world. 50% of our staff are aged 35 and below. So they're very excited. They are the millennials. They want to be innovative. The issue is the resistant fighters, the middle management, who have been there because of how they have been, and they don't want to change, and hence why I can relate that picture with who wants to change and who wants, change. I can relate it. The issue in, I think, a lot of corporates is the middle management who wants to protect their turf. Now, from my experience, how do you address this? I think that's the biggest challenge that we currently have at the moment.
Yeah, and that internal stakeholder buy-in one is really hard to answer. The way we look at it is, there's the better approach to this is saying, okay, what really drives them, right? Every human, every individual has a set of personal drivers. So how do you make your innovation initiatives relevant to them, right? And this is when you start looking at the levers you can pull, and you start touching on some harder things, like how you incentivize, right? And back to that culture question, there are certain behaviors you either reward or you punish. And that is very much related to culture, because culture is an accepted part of what behaviors, collective behaviors the group celebrates and cherishes, and what selective behaviors do you punish. And there's that scenario here where how do you get people to do things that they don't really want to do? Because the reason why they're fighting it is because the path of emotional resistance for them is misaligned in their mind to what you're trying to do. So you need to get back to whether it's the incentivization, whether it's their KPIs, whether it's how they are going to be managed, whether, there are so many different things, levers that are connected to why they are doing what they do versus what they should do, right? And what they will shut down and kill. And, the truth is, some people say, well, if they don't want to buy in, you just fire them and get new people. Yeah, kind of, right? But is that really solving the issue? Because if you get a new person and you drop them into that same job and with the same structure, the same remuneration, same governance, the likelihood is they'll behave exactly the same way. But now what we're doing is we're asking questions like, how do you change your remuneration policy? How do you change the culture of what you reward and what you punish? Let me give you a real example here. One of the things we do is a startup studio. So we'll partner with a corporate to build startups in parallel with them, straight up startups. We'll have serial entrepreneurs like myself and a few others, tech, a whole mix of people will run this. And on the extreme end, for some of our more mature clients, we do this with all their employees, right? So we're building startup style. The biggest challenge when we do it with their employees is this cultural challenge. And this is a real example. So literally last week is the team came in, they said, Jordan, got this project, we're having a meeting, and they'd given me this ridiculous report of their current project they're working on. It's like all this paper. The first response to me is like, why have you written so much ridiculous reporting? But I barely cracked the thing. I went into this meeting, and they expected me to read it, right? Their progress on the current project. I didn't crack it. All I did was I went around and I said, guys, 80 hours a week, the next 18 years of our life, if that's what it's going to take, we are going to do whatever it takes to make this idea a reality. We're going to change the world. Awesome. Who's with me? And I put my hand up. I was like, who's with me? And there's this really awkward 30 seconds, which is a long time when you're the only person in the room with your hand up, right? And I looked at them, I said, guys, I think you need to talk amongst yourselves. And then they came back to me 3 hours later. They said, Jordan, you're right. It's good, but it's not great. We're going to kill it. And the important thing there is I didn't kill it. They have to own their own ideas, right? They have to take ownership for killing it. And when they did kill it, the first thing I did is I pulled them out in front of there's quite a few teams in the studio, and I pulled them out on the stage. And I said, guys, stop what you're doing. This team here today did more to further innovation in the last quarter than all of you. And everyone's like, what the hell? I'm like, why? Because they killed their idea. Everyone's like, what the hell? Like, you can see people's face go, hold on, their project is failing, and you're celebrating that. And I'm like, yes, they did more to innovation. And by the way, this team, such a great job by killing your idea, I'm going to bonus you. So I bonused them. And everyone's like, what the hell? My project's working, right? And these guys are getting bonused. I said, you guys work so freaking hard, take a vacation. Take 2 weeks off. Come back. And when you come back, pick any project in here you want to work on. Or maybe ramp up a new idea. Do whatever you want. We've got to support you. The first time I do this, everyone looks at me like I'm crazy. Because what we're doing now is we're trying to celebrate behaviors. We're trying to celebrate failure, right? And the interesting thing is, over time, when we see this with other clients, I don't even have to remind people to clap when I bring people up on stage now. They're clapping, and they are genuinely celebrating when a team has the courage to not overinvest and keep running with a baby they know is fundamentally flawed, but to look at the evidence they've collected and kill it and take pride in doing so, right? But you've got to create that environment. There's a lot of levers you've got to pull.
Sharifa, thank you for the comment. Let me just jump on what Jordan said. I've lived through this in my 19 years in the different organizations I've run. I think you are probably one of the most fortunate individuals where you have leadership at the top all bought in and ready to disrupt. I think that's a really cool place to be in, number one. Number two, I think the fact that they've created this department of sorts and you're at the helm of it, I think what a massive opportunity. And I can share a little bit more with you later in terms of some of the ideas you can do. But I think Jordan said it well. I'd say the middle management will be an issue for a lot of people because middle management usually have aspirations to grow their career. They don't want to make mistakes because someone might not like them. They may be deemed as failures. There's a lot of all of this happening. One of the things I've seen some companies do is hire psychologists because what you're dealing with now is actually human behavior more than anything else. There's a lot of things you can do. A lot of things you can do. Some of the things that Jordan talked about are called symbols. What are symbols of change that you guys are celebrating? Bonuses, recognizing people who fail, so on and so forth, are all examples of tactics that can be done. But at the heart of it, you need to change behaviors. And when you change behaviors, it's going to be a journey, and it needs to be led by from the top. Right? It needs to be led from the top. So the level of involvement from the top and the different people within the top depends. So like, for example, the example I quoted earlier on, when I was hiring every single person I interviewed, my HR director turned around and said, "You're crazy." I said, "Yeah, I've never done this, but I think fundamentally it's a signal." And that to me was a symbol. And after that, the change that happened, the amount of people talking about what I was doing, because it's never been done in the history of the organization, that in itself had a lot of weight with regards to making sure people recognize how serious I was with regards to some of the things I was saying. Now, you can't do it across everything. So I'd say great examples, great ideas. I'd say think about a psychologist and the role of a psychologist in this group of people. And I'd say there will be elements of, if people don't get on board the bus, then they need to get off the bus. You know, that's the hard part of change and transformation. But I reckon you are in an absolute sweet spot right now, because I've been in organizations where I work with the board and I work with CEOs and their direct reports, where you have a CIO who's been 26 years in the role, and the individual will find every reason why they shouldn't buy new technology or do things differently, because that would threaten that individual's job and all the people working for that individual, as an example. And that's inherent behavior today in large, successful, public listed organizations as well. So I've seen that side as well. So I think you are in an amazing place, in an amazing company that's willing to disrupt itself proactively. I think speaks volumes of where you guys are. I'm happy to take the conversation offline with a bit more details if that helps, sharing a bit more of my experience as well.
We have time for one more quick question. Anyone from that side of the room?
Am I on?
Hi, Cletus Stevenson from Dealer Tech. We are a startup company doing automotive retail. We disrupt the automotive retail sector here in Malaysia. I've been with the company for about 6 months. And we have been, just as you have conflicts within the organization where employees are resistant to change, your CIOs and CTOs and all these people, we as a company, startup company, when we do pitches with, we've done some very interesting pitches with some of the big brands here, right? Automotive retail companies. And very interestingly, they tell you, wow, our solution is on a cloud, we are mobile-based, we are on a mobile phone, yeah? The CTO, the technology officer sitting there said, Cletus, I may lose my job if you bring all this on board, yeah? I said, why? You are charging me a very nominal fee of a few $1,000s a month. It's more than what a sales advisor earns in my department, right? And I have already invested a few $1 million in my hardware and my CapEx and my infrastructure here. I have a huge team here, and you are disrupting the very space that I am working with, and I have to work with you because I see your solution as really a very innovative way to transform this way that the car business is rolling in this country. Yeah, it's a very traditional, old way, that's mindset there. Old businesses, they refuse to change. But I am in discussion with him, and he tells me these things, and he said, look, I have a problem, right? How do you overcome or transcend these kind of barriers? Haresh, I think you've explained some things I can relate directly to you, what you are saying, and how do you really overcome this? Because we are really in a fix. We have a good product, we have a digital app, we will transform the landscape. On the other hand, the client has got his own issues. I understand from where he is coming from, because if I'm in his position, I would do the same and say, look, I'm also weary of my team, my job, and everything else, yeah? So this is a difficult situation, and in the last, well, couple of months or so, I've been confronted with this really on a real life case scenario. And then I went back and thought about it. I said, why do we call them CIOs and CTOs? We should just call them Chief Destructive Officers or something that is related to them, yeah? Digital officers, the disruptive, because they need to embed whatever their post is down the line. So innovation, yes, they need to do. And not only down the line, they also need to bring this up to the board of directors and people who have invested, because you just simply can't write off a capex. You know, it affects the bottom line immediately. So how do you do this? Thank you.
Wow. Look, there are no right or wrong answers. It's a fantastic point you raise, by the way, and I live with it every day. And sometimes it's frustrating, and I can sense the passion in Jordan when he talks about it, and I'm sensing he goes through that as well. Look, I think if you're in startup, you have to be persistent, tenacious, never give up. So please don't. That's the first step. I think same with us in the corporate world, believe it or not. The other thing I would say is approach pitches differently to different customers. This fear of losing jobs is real. It's very real. And that's why one of the things I've said, the role of the CIO has changed. The CIO has spent 80% of their time keeping the lights on, keeping the infrastructure running, updating patches, this, that now with the cloud, technically speaking, we take care of that. So all that time that they used to spend keeping infrastructure up, they don't have to do it anymore. So now the role of the CIO is to actually add value and become a business partner to the business, to help the business find innovative solutions that can allow them to be relevant, to be more efficient, to innovate new business models, and so on and so forth. So the role of the CIO has fundamentally changed. And you think about it, right? There's an element of fear there, and it's only human nature. And then you've got customers who've made huge investments into the existing infrastructure as well. Okay? So how do they overcome that? Now, a lot of the times what we do is we do business value analysis together with our customers. We analyze the investments they've made, the value it's driving, and what are the alternatives to that. And that's a fairly sophisticated study that helps put things in perspective, that's got timelines, that's got TCO in there, that allows them then to start thinking differently. Obviously, we will talk about the disruptions in the industry and so on and so forth, and those disruptive factors and what happens there becomes critical in the decision making, meaning, do I write off my current investments that I've made now and go to the cloud with you because I can then free up my cash flow because I'll have more CapEx, for example, to go do other things and be relevant, or do I wait? And those are analysis that we do with customers as part of the process of getting them to cross the line and to think differently. The other thing I've done differently is I've started my pitches telling people why they should not listen to my pitch, all right, or why my idea won't work. And the moment I do that, what I've noticed is they said, okay, 1, okay, 2, okay, 3, okay, I get that. Now tell me why it works. And I start to engage them in a very different way already, and then they want to know more, right? So, in your case, your opening pitch could be, here's why you shouldn't turn around and listen to my pitch. 1, my solution might make you lose your job. 2, I might, all your investments that you've made would go to waste. You're stating the obvious, but you're getting it out of the way and getting it out of their mind. And then you start your next slide and you say, here's why I think you should listen to me, because I can make you a rock star, I can transform your industry, and potentially I could double your profits. As an example, right? And that, I think, has a different form of engagement, because you start to bring down the walls of defense and engage in a journey towards those kind of decisions. It's always a journey. It's never one-off in that particular instance in terms of the engagement with such people.
Very quickly, I've built many startups in my life, and timing is a factor, right? And the truth is, like, give you an example, like, Spotify. There were hundreds of startups that were doing the same thing that just died because timing was wrong. And the timing in that sense was that the music labels, the music owners, didn't want to engage. And when they did, it gave birth to, Spotify, which in turn, again, all the content owners gave birth to Netflix. And that's a bit about a timing, and timing is important. And there is a scenario here to make it more real. Many years ago, I was doing cloud-based POS systems. And I would go to these big corporates and be like, man, like, this is nuts. You should, transfer all this crazy cool stuff. And they would come to me and say, yeah, but I've just put X million into Micros or to Squirrel or to Beep, into all these physical tills, and I've made the CapEx spend. That's a hard one to get around, right? And so timing, sometimes you just got to wait a little bit. But the key thing here is to not waste your time with a lot of the organizations that are just nowhere near ready to start thinking about the future, the benefits. So it's about finding that early evangelist, which are maybe not the biggest startup corporate, but which is like the middle, the SME that I can get to deploy this, who might get this, who might be more nimble, more agile, might be more receptive to what I'm saying. But the key thing here, which is what Haresh just said, the reality for me is all about a pilot. Because you're going to, in order to make the business to make a decision to write off CapEx spend that they've invested in stuff that kind of works, that isn't broken right now, then you're going to have to come with more than just a chat. So in my experience as an entrepreneur, it's always been like, hey, how can we do a little experiment, a little pilot, 1 month, right? We deploy it, we get a real case study going. We get some real numbers, some real metrics going. And we start putting a real business case forward to help them sell internally and bring the organization around. And the truth is you won't ever get big decisions signed off internally unless you have that evidence. So the question here is potentially not trying to sell, but trying to just, how do we just test?
Coexist.
Yeah, coexist.
You could coexist. That's a good point. You could coexist. In the world of the cloud, I think about it in 3 ways: platforms, intelligence, and partnerships. So platforms are obvious. Intelligence is about data and analytics. And partnerships are about how you turn around, you harness the power of the ecosystem, you coexist, you crowdsource to be able to innovate.
Because the mindset is quite skeptical. I mean, a lot of times they look at you and they go, it's great tech, but yeah, you're tiny, there's like 10 of you, what do I care, is it really going to work? And in most cases, that skepticism is quite well placed, right? Because most startups, their product doesn't do anything near what they say it does, right? So that scenario here is they will be judging you from a skeptical mindset. It's like, how do you just get started to go get some real data? And bear in mind, when you start, you're building a real relationship then. You're both in the bed. Regardless of what the results are of those pilots, you're in a much stronger position to potentially grow with that relationship.